Hello. So I've been very busy the past week and I've not been able to do a video talking about this new Oracle think tank witch reveal they've done. But here we are now. We'll start off with Sichuan Witch Mumu. Its first skill is very similar to cards like Chronotith Tigger in that you can get 3+1s by riding over or going to turn 2 basically. Although in this case it has to be a witch, so you should be playing witches with this. And this can in a way punish you for playing non-witches. So just bear that in mind. But I'm not sure if I want to ride this because the second skill is a Soul Blast 1 and Restless unit, so a bit like the main in a way. Look at 5 from the top of your deck. Choose up to 3 cards with Witch in their card name from among them and reveal them. Choose one of the reveal cards, put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. If you did not reveal 3 cards, put them into your soul. So you're basically taking up to 3 from your top 5. One of which you're going to add to your hand, which is a Witch card. Then you do up to 3 for the sake of meeting a condition, which is that if you have 3 of them revealed, you get to keep this card on the board. If you don't show them 3, you show them like 1 or 2 or 0, then you're just going to soul charge this card anyway. And that's very handy because you may find that you're just burning soul, or you have like multiple copies of this, again burning soul. Maybe you're going to use Koroi Kazuchi, which isn't as likely to be fair because you'll probably be trying to play as many Witch Grade 2s as you can so that the first skill doesn't whiff basically. But if you did use Koroi Kazuchi and you happen to be playing stands, you could also use this card a second time in the turn because unlike in the main, it's not actually a once per turn, or a hard once per turn for that matter. So there is actually technically no once per turn clause. Technically Susano as well could do the same thing as Koroi Kazuchi if you want to ride that, but again that depends. Maybe you want to play a Witch Engine deck, who knows. It's just like the last wave really, you could try to use them as engines if you wanted to. The other thing that's kind of handy is that Premium Collection 2020 has a Striasis crit as well, which could be a useful card to add to hand, maybe, depending. So that's something to consider. And there are cards like Slacking Bird in Premium, so if you did do an early game with this, say you want to grade store or something and just keep using this over and over, or you just play into long game, you can always just keep soul charging and drawing with it. Efficient Carb as well, the stand trigger, can also do the same thing if you want to do that as well. So you have those options, and there are obviously a bunch of other soul charge cards like Urali, Gemini and so on, and Sai and God knows what else. There's like loads, I'm pretty sure in this clan. And yeah, there's quite a few things, so it's very sustainable, this card, because a lot of OT pluses most of the time tend to rely on CB resources, so it's quite nice for this reason. I think another thing that's quite handy is that if you're riding Lilac Witch Biber, which is 12k, you could play the grade 2 game while having this card just generally generating you like free advantage every time. So you can sort of out advantage your opponent in some way with this card, which is quite handy if you wanted to play like that. Obviously I'd probably consider playing less grade 3s, so maybe cut something like Coco if you don't want to play that. I don't think everyone will though, because there are some downsides as well to playing Coco, but there are upsides technically. Coco does have some uses still, so they don't really like creep out or anything. They've made it as an option almost, like whether you want to play Coco or not. Depends on what kind of thing you want to do, but playing as little grade 3s as you can is obviously a good thing. But the deck will rely on riding grade 3s from hand, so that's something to bear in mind. But with cards like Sichuan Witch Mumu, you could try to sort of maintain that as well. And there are a few ways to manage the grade 3 requirements a bit in this deck. Then the other thing as well, we do have D series cards that have Witcher name, but I'm not really sure how this is going to work because we don't have a ruling on this as far as I'm aware. So we've had a ruling on sorceresses in that they are actually treated as sorcerers, which is useful now to know because cards like Fixus, for example, can actually add Hex Orb to your hand, for example. Hex Orb sorcerers. So that's actually a thing, but I wish they had addressed this whole witch thing because it doesn't look like the World Witch has really been future-proof properly, especially in the context of nation cards. So I'm a bit worried about this, like how is this going to go in events, because if the English game is technically trying to be accurate to the Japanese game as much as it can, then surely they'd be trying to rule this as well, like in a Yu-Gi-Oh! For example. Yu-Gi-Oh! They did the whole thing with Summon Skull, Axe of Despair, just an early example really, where they treated them as the Archfiend archetype because they didn't realize Archfiend was actually going to be an archetype until Dark Crisis, at least the translation side of things. So that's obviously a concern. They do need to address this. It's kind of urgent as well. Like, it should really have been addressed ages ago, but with this set coming out, there's going to be some hype. People are going to want to play witches, obviously, and it's also a decent option to play in a tournament. So if it's a decent option to play in a tournament, well, then judges are going to have a bit of a headache with this as well, and players might go into a tournament with false expectations, for that matter. So that's going to be a problem as well. So we just have to find out how this would work. Then we have Jadewich TT. When this card is discarded from hand during your turn, if you have a Vanguard with Witch in its name, you can Soul +1 call it to raise. So this is quite good in that if you're discarding for cost, say for example Floral Witch Mimi, or for example, let's just say the new grade 3, right, that we're going to get to soon, it makes it feel like you're not negging, which is really nice, because negging yourself actually kind of hurts nudity, especially when you're trying to set up for Ichikishima in the 4th turn. So it's quite good for that. Then you've got the other skill, which is when placed on guard, you can choose any number of sentinels and just discard them, and it gets 20k shield. So notice that it's put, so it doesn't have to actually be just from hand. You can put it out as an intercept, which is very handy. You may find, for example, that maybe you're just oversaturated with sentinels in your hand, so you want to use it for that reason. Maybe your opponent has like a guard restrict, so maybe you want to use it for that reason as well. There's all kinds of motivations, but just note that you can also technically multi-attack with this card. So if you had something like, say, Maid of Libra or Tsubaki, Battle Maid Tsubaki, anything really that has like end of battle or on battle discard a card, you could call this to a rearguard circle, just as long as you have a Witch Vanguard. So if you don't play Witch deck, you could always just stride a Witch, I suppose. That's technically a gimmick you could do as well. But just note that the card does lack power gain, so you'd have to be using other stuff to try and make the numbers worth it, because obviously multi-attacking isn't that good. If your opponent just damage checks a trigger, or if it's too easy to guard, then maybe it wasn't worth the negging, or maybe it wasn't worth the whole deck list in general. But there is also cards like Zozo, which can give power to your front row when you reveal multiple imaginary gift protects, so it's also going to be handy for that too. So all in all, it's a very nice card. Don't choose it with Sterling Witch Momo if you can. It's going to miss out on the power gain, so just look out for that. But hey, maybe you might find that there's a situation where it actually works and the power gain is actually less important than calling this card. That's possible. And then you've got Bentot Witch Yo-Yo. So this card is a Vanguard circle and a front row rearguard circle. So if you still want to use your Coco decks, or if you want to stride, you could still make use of this on your rearguard circle. Otherwise, you just ride this and basically attack on your first battle. You can end your fight by cost discarding 2 from hand, counterblasting 1, and then taking a grade 3 witch from hand and riding it in stand position. Note that you have to have your opponent on grade 3 or greater, so you can't do a high roll kind of thing with it. It's just like Battle Sister Fromage and like the new Oracle Think Tank cards that they released in Clan Collection Volume 1, like Fio or Sai. They all got nerfed to require your opponent being grade 3. So just note that, so that you don't end up making accidents. It's quite tricky. These cards can be easy to slip up on if you're not careful, especially because it also can depend on like whether you stride or you don't stride, or what you have out there that could restrict some of these different abilities. Then another thing as well that's interesting is that it's actually a net 0 technically, but if you use TT, you can make those discard costs into pluses, because the discard 2 is going to be compensated by your twin drive. The riding from hand is going to be compensated from your protect gift. So it's sort of like a net 0 in advantage, unless you're discarding TTs. Then the other thing is if you ride upon it, so just make sure you don't stride if you're going to do that, because if you stride you won't be able to do the skill. But if you just have it as your grade 3 and you're not striding, obviously that's going to happen all the time in the premium. You can basically call this card to rear or get an imaginary gift protect, which is also handy. And if you're getting a protect, which is more the reason you don't really need Coke in this deck if you want to generate protects. Just like with the grade 2 they're reprinting actually, if you don't want to go for the BB play on your turn 2, you could do the on ride and get the gift on grade 2 with the promo that they're reprinting. So you've got ways of getting multiple protect gifts, like 4 maximum, without playing Coco. So you can still use Zozo to then power up your front row by like up to 20,000 if you wanted to. If you did play Coco, just note that you'd need the other grade 2 promo, the one that's also getting reprinted, to be in your Salt if you want to use it on turn 3. And that's assuming you don't stride, of course. So what you do is you then have Coco, you then draw 2 cards, and then you'd have to discard like as many wishes as you want and turn them into protect gifts. But that can, while it can give more power with Zozo, it is a bit more setup. It will require you either riding that specific grade 2 or using its neg 1 skill to stack the top 3 for deck. Which in a way is okay because Coco does plus in a way, so it's sort of like a neg that's being offset a bit by Coco's plussing. It's sort of just like a balancing act really to kind of pay up for the fact that you're using it on turn 3. So you're still plussing something at least, but of course in Prime there are sort of more missed opportunities, so maybe it might be a bit weird to play it. Maybe there'll be more games where you're just wasting stuff. So all in all, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think of these new Oracle Think Tank Witch cards. Maybe you have some combos as well. Share them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.